Team. Welcome back. So we're on these. You just completed a very huge task on that first boss level, and I wanted to congratulate you all on that. We're moving on now to the material between the first and second exam now, and this week is going to be focused on finance and interest. This is something that is very important to cover in this class for those who have never seen it before, because this is very useful in terms of just being a good human. It's good to know these things, even though despite the name, it's not particularly interesting, but I hope that we can get through it and learn some things and not gouge our eyes out from the boredom. So, moving forward, I'm going to just lay out an example, as I always do, and then define some terms and kind of point to how they relate to the example to the right here. So, the example will be that you are borrowing $5,000 from a credit union, which I'll abbreviate as CU, in the form of a student loan, where it has APR of 6%. Talk about what all these mean shortly. And the term of the loan is 3 years. So 3-year term. Okay, so with that as our example, of course, I should mention that interest is, of course, the cost of borrowing money. It's like a renter's fee. So if you rent something like a car or an apartment, you have to pay a fee to rent those things, and it works similarly with money, where the amount that you have to pay scales with the amount of time that the money is borrowed for. So first of all, I'm just going to say, before we define all the terms, I'm just going to mention that in all of these, B is going to stand for borrower, and L is going to stand for lender. I'm going to hope that those are somewhat self-explanatory. And so I'll just dive right in. So the principal which will be denoted with the letter P, is the amount of money initially borrowed. So in this case, that would be the $5,000. Great, so now we need the interest rate. This is denoted by a little r. And this is the rate paid by the borrower on the principal that has been borrowed. So that would be this 6% here. So I'll just start pointing to these things, because why not? Arrows make everything look really organized. And term. So the term T is the amount of time before the loan has to be paid off. So this is that 3-year term thing. It means that after 3 years, the credit union will come in and it will either collect the money or collect the collateral or do whatever they have to do if the money's not there. the amount of time before the loan must be paid off. Okay, great. So those are the three. These are the three major pieces to. These are the three major pieces that go into interest, and today we're going to talk about simple interest. So there are two major types of interest plans, and we'll talk about simple interest first, and then for the following module we'll do compound interest, which is slightly more complicated, but really not too bad. So now I'm going to just clear off I'm going to leave the example there, but I'm going to clear off this section so that I can talk about the actual formula for interest. So the interest I, this will be the amount of extra money you have to pay when you pay off the loan. So if you borrow money, if you borrow this $5,000, you'll have to, of course, pay $5,000 back plus the interest. So the interest is all the money you pay back minus the initial, the principal. So the formula for simple interest here is, for the formula for I interest is just the principal times the rate times the term. So that would be just the extra that you pay. Similarly, there is, so just write interest here. Similarly, we can define the formula for the future payoff. So this is just the total money that you'd have to pay at the end. And this is denoted as F. And F equals P plus I. So it's equal to the principal, the initial amount of money that you borrowed, plus the interest that accumulated. So that's equal to, of course, substituting in for I, it's equal to P plus PRT. And then from here, this form of this formula makes a lot of sense because it's just what you paid plus the interest. But it can be written more compactly if you factor out a P from both of these. So then it would be P times 1 plus RT, which I think kind of encodes the meaning a little bit. It makes it a little bit harder to tell what's going on, but it's sometimes written like this. I'll probably usually write it like this just to make it simpler, even though you have to waste extra time by writing P twice. So these two things mean the same thing. This is the, in the end, this is the formula for the future payoff. So just using these formulas now, I'm going to walk through just this very simple example and maybe one more related to it, and then we'll try to tackle some more complicated problems involving this in class. So first of all, let's just try to figure out the amount of money that we would owe at the end of the 3-year term, having borrowed $5,000 from the credit union at this interest rate of 6%. So we need to define things here. So I'll just write P equals 5,000, and I don't really care too much if you drop the units, as long as you remember that this is in dollars. Doesn't matter too much, but don't accidentally put it in thousands of dollars or anything like that. And now, so T, the term, that equals 3. So this is in the term is usually in the units. It's always in units of time, but it's usually the specific units, years, months, whatever, is usually the amount of time that more interest is added. So if interest is added every year, then the term should be in units of years. But if interest is added every month or every week, then the interest then the term should be in those units. It should be in weeks or months instead. If that doesn't make any sense to you, you can feel free to completely ignore that statement. I'll always specify these things for you. And lastly, rate. To do this right, we have to convert the rate from a percentage to a decimal, to a fraction of 1. So that means that we have to change 6%. 6% is 6 1/100ths, so that's equal to 0.06. And so now all we need to do is just plug this into our formula for f. So f will be equal to, well, actually first let's do I. So I will be equal to P times R times T, or 5,000 times 3, or I should do times R times 0.06 times 3, and that will give us 900, and I'll put the dollars there. So I is equal to $900. That means that F would be equal to 5,000 plus 900, which is 5,900 dollars. Okay, so now let's switch this up a tiny bit, and let's say that we want to borrow a little bit more, but the amount that we want to borrow, we want to figure out the amount that we should borrow such that the interest at the end of the 3-year term is exactly $1,000. So we don't know, so we're borrowing question mark. We don't know how much. But we know that we want the interest to equal $1,000. So in this case, how would we do this? It ends up being very simple. We can just look back at our formulas that define the various pieces of this simple interest story, and let's say, okay, well, we've got T and R and I, but no P. What do? It looks like this thing would be pretty useful to us here, the formula for interest. So let's go ahead and set the things equal to one another. So let's put 1,000, which is I, is equal to P, we don't know that, we want to figure it out, times 0.06 times 3. Okay, now the only thing that we have left to do is just take these numbers and move them over to this side. And so we'll do that by dividing both sides by 0.06 and 3. Now we've got that these things cancel, of course, on the bottom and top of this fraction. And we've got that P is equal to 1,000 over 0.06, which is equal to, rounded off, $5,555.56. And so this is the amount of money that we would have to borrow for the interest to be equal to 1,000 at the end. So we'll do in class some more problems like this, where we have to figure out certain amounts that we would have to borrow, and some other interesting problems, relatively interesting problems involving this. And then after that, we'll move on to compound interest and forward from there. So thank you for paying attention. Take a look at the quiz to make sure that you are good with all this stuff. I didn't just drop that. And I'll see you on Tuesday.